I'd like to introduce you to a guy called Adam Aitchison, and he's a consultant at the Anxiety Clinic. Now, I spoke with Adam before, and he is expert in what we know as NLP, which is, I think, Neuro Linguistic Programming.
That's correct, sure. Yeah.
So what we're going to look at now is Adam's going to give you an insight into what it is, how it's used by media and even videos on YouTube, etc., to make you think you've understood something, but yet they can also change the way you feel about things. It can basically change, a sort of hypnotism, the way you are. So Adam uses this for good, and he uses it with people who would, under normal circumstances, run off to Dr. Madman and take his poisons. And so Adam's using this particular science to do what the drugs don't do without the side effects as well. So it's a pretty much a win-win situation. So what I'll do is hand you over to Adam Aitchison and say to you, Adam, good evening, and thanks for joining me.
No problem, sure. Always a pleasure to talk to you. So, NLP, the letters stand for neuro, to do the brain, linguistic, which is language, and programming, which is, well, as certainly one of the co-founders was a computer programmer and mathematician. They kind of looked at the brain as a programmable computer. If the government and big corporations have hold of this technology, that's time to worry. We don't want to be programmed without a consent. Now, if you can recognize this stuff, you can take a step back from it. If you don't know what's going on, they're pulling your strings. It's as simple as that.
In the same way as the magicians use magic to obfuscate what it is they're doing, and there's an effect, and they usually have an effect on you. So yeah, I'm hearing exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Would I also be correct in saying Tony Blair, it seemed to come in en masse under Tony Blair, and back in the day, a guy called Brian Gerrish launched on the alternative media the idea of common purpose. And basically what he was actually putting out there was a new system that was going to be used against all those in the corporate world, including teaching, including the police, all security services, civil servants, etc., through sending them on copious courses and thus using this new science of mind manipulation across the board. And then, of course, it was moved into the schools, especially as they became academies. So that's how I understand the beginnings of this as it was launched into our society. Is that correct, or do you know?
From what I've seen, Sean, I'd certainly give you a given amount of agreement there. The outcome, the end game, Tony Blair and the big corporations and what have you obviously had their ideas there. To implement their ideas, they needed a vehicle. The vehicle, among other things, would be NLP. That's the way it's installed. It's the way to get people to think a certain way, to follow instructions, without really considering whether it makes sense or not. So, so the vehicle was almost certainly, if not entirely NLP was certainly in there.
A bit like the Lily wave, as the carrier wave.
Yes.
For noxious things on the frequency.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I've just done a short video today where they've put up this humongous
seen it, yeah.
Mass. I've never seen anything like it before. So you're basically saying it does look like this is the way this system works, that the corporations are getting into everything, is first to deconstruct something and then become the ever required fixers of whatever they've broken. We've got that with Microsoft, who actually damaged one of the core kernels on the internet and then built Microsoft around completely and utterly fixing it. So that's why Microsoft became such a huge thing in relation to computers and people's ability to get onto the internet. Mac was the other way. They didn't work off anything damaged, which is why it was so smooth and safe and secure. It's not the case today, of course. It's probably the worst out of all the components to use if you're on the internet, for security especially.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that using that kind of a technology, again with the carrier wave for the frequencies, which is the TV's on a carrier wave, your radio.
Yeah. It's basically language. Language is the carrier wave.
Yeah.
Speaking, listening to words. Yeah.
Yeah. This is extremely.
It's very, very underrated. People think, oh yeah, I'm not paying attention to that. Trust me, and here you are.
Yeah.
So if I say social, as you sit there listening to me talk, waving my hands about like this, how easy is it for you to become aware of your feet right now?
Of my what, sorry?
How easy would it be for you to become aware of your feet? Okay, so where's your attention just shifted to?
I'm afraid I haven't heard one of the words.
That's a shame.
I can't come. I'm not getting the question. Can you put that again?
Sure. So as you sit there, listening to me speak, watching me on the screen, isn't it easy to notice how your feet feel?
The feet.
Your feet, yeah.
Well, I'm not concentrating on my feet. I
No.
am, of course.
But you were now, but you are now, yeah. So you didn't notice your feet before. As soon as I mentioned it, you went, oh yeah.
Oh, now that's powerful.
Yeah. Ooh, hypnosis, the bad man. Yeah, how hard is it, really?
My goodness.
You know what I'm doing. I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that hit home immediately once I got that then. I mean, and think of the television. All these newsreaders, it's a script that they're all doing. And you can go on each television's news in the day and they're all reciting the main body of a particular script, and then they might put a bit of peripheral around it to make it their own. But ultimately, if you look and check that, they're all speaking the same script. So what you've just presented there is that they've put some serious efforts into those scripts in relation to what words they're using to invoke a particular thought pattern. Yeah. Now that's yeah.
So what we've got here in NLP, and this is so people can recognize it when it's used upon, and you still have to be wary even then, because it can still hook you even when you know what's going on. Yeah. I can testify to this because I work in these circles, and I've seen people run it on me, and it's like it kind of pulls me in, even though I can see what they're doing. So it's very powerful stuff. So what I did there with you, Sean, this is called pacing and leading. So what I did was I paced a few things in your life that I know are true for you. As you sit there, so you're sitting there and you bring us, that one's true. Listening to me speak, that was true. Watching me wave my arms around, that was true. On the screen, that was true. Isn't it easy to notice? So that's then a suggestion to notice how your feet feel, and you go,
immediately.
Hello, my feet feel that.
Yeah, that's.
So what you'll get with pacing the leading is a verifiable truth in your subject. But true. And then you give them the thing that you want them to take it.
And then
that must be true.
There's adverts for socks and shoes immediately after.
in the old 80s and 90s sales stuff, you call this a yes sir. Get your buyer to agree with 3 or 4 things, then close the sale. That's kind of real primitive stuff. That's not NLP, that's garbage. But the basis there is very similar. Pacing and leading can be used for anything, then not just sales.
So in teaching people these programs in the 80s for sales was pretty much them setting in the background foundation for this next.
Yeah, it was very, very primitive stuff compared to what's available today.
Now, maybe 10, 12 years ago, we came across Froebel's system for kindergarten, which were formed in Germany. He was actually a very smart young lad, and basically he worked out that on children, especially when they are 4, 5, 6, maybe, well, even from 3, 4, that using shapes was pretty much like opening a window into the soul to put in there whatever you wanted to put in. Of course, providing what the kindergarten staff are putting in, if it's good, it was so beneficial that children were just becoming something you would have never imagined. And of course, naturally, the Tavistock was very interested in that, and they brought it from Germany over to the Tavistock in London. I think this was 1920s, early 1920s. They tweaked it and sent it back to Germany, and the format that they'd sent back was the exact format that educated the entire generation that we know as the brown shirts. And so basically what you can say is there that by misusing the Froebel system, Tavistock in London was able to program a generation to worship, so that when Hitler came along, there it went. And basically, if you look at what they actually concluded, that is, they annihilated that entire generation that worshipped the man, which is, as I've put through in many videos, it's an act called killing the creditor. We will not go into that, of course, but what we also found was that this was a big part of what they were installing in this new raft that came in with Tony Blair, basically, New Labour. And of course, they're not going to be brown shirts today because they're not promoting the idea that the older generation have destroyed that generation's future by diluting the race. What they're using against this younger generation today is the fact that the older generation have destroyed your planet and thus your future. So they're same mechanic. And I'm just wondering, are you aware of Froebel in any way being used in these systems today?
It will be speculation on my part, but I dare say it's bloody true.
Yeah.
So let's just look at an example from society. We have a huge percentage of people running around right now in masks. Yeah, whatever. It's fine by me. I don't mind.
It's quite ridiculous.
Yeah. So what we've got, certainly back when I was at school, I know we're of a similar age, so I'm sure the same is true for you.
22. I'm 22.
That's right. Yeah, we're both that age. Yeah. So back when I was at school, besides maths and English, there wasn't really anything that was of any lifelong use. It was just academic stuff. Nothing to do with money, nothing to do with interest, nothing to do with life skills. None of that stuff existed. I guess it's even worse today.
Yeah.
What we did have was we had a system of indoctrination where teachers have been trained to treat kids a certain way. And what I found in my school was the vast majority of the teachers would teach badly, because as kids we looked up to them, we assumed they knew everything, even though some of them were only in the mid-20s. It seems a bit strange now. But we looked up to them as they know everything. They're teachers. They're adults.
I have to put myself out of that category. I saw right through them quite early on, so just basically apply me to notice.
Yeah. So I remember numerous kids in our class asking what would be considered good questions. And often the teachers just didn't know the answer. But we're all saying, you know what, that's a good question, but I don't know the answer. Come back tomorrow, we'll have an answer for you. That's a good teacher.
Yeah.
What they do is they would humiliate that child in front of all the other peers, in front of 30 other kids, basically to get them to shut up and not ask questions.
Yeah.
So what we've got going here is two things. We've got shut up and don't ask questions. Don't question authority, and don't think for yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another thing that ties in with that, which is what's affecting 99% of the adult population today, is they move away from fear and consequences.
They move away from
fear and consequences. Okay, so in NLP, what we have these numerous things called meta programs. Meta being above and a program being like a computer. And these are filters that the brain uses to come up with decisions and behaviors. So although there's many of these, the one I'm talking about now would be classed as the towards or away from reference. So a meta program is basically a sliding scale with an extreme at each end. At this end, we have moving towards goals. And at this end, we have moving away from consequences. So for any given situation, you will be somewhere on the scale. Now, you don't have to be in the same place for everything. So relationships, you might be here, but for work, you might be over here. But you'll always be here for work. Anything work-related, your decisions are made with this filter here. So you'd think that most people are kind of round about the average middle bit. Not so. You know, 98, 99% are right on the extreme over here. They're moving away from consequences. Okay? Moving towards goals, they're clueless. Absolutely. They haven't learned how to do it, and they've had it beaten out of them by well-meaning parents that say, don't do that, you'll hurt yourself. Don't do that, you'll hurt yourself. Don't do that, you'll get into trouble. It's all moving away from consequences. Wow. No one knows, or very few people know how to move towards goals, but you can pick these people out because it's everyone that's successful in society. They're all over this end, and there's very few of them.
And the secret societies are making sure there are no consequences.
Yeah, they're making sure it doesn't move this way.
Yeah, it's so obvious when you put it in those terms. It really is. For me, as a child, I didn't care about anything. If I wanted to do something, I would do it. If something said keep out, I would want to know why. If someone said danger, of course, I wanted to know what the danger was, touch it, feel it, see it. So I was completely opposite to everybody that I grew up with. Yeah. To the point most kids weren't allowed to play with me, but they did anyway, because they were always on an adventure. So I can see where me grabbing onto all this for so many years is quite a natural progression for me. You know, I've never followed the herd. I've always led whatever I've been involved in. That's just the way I am.
And how does authority take that, Sean? How well have you done with authority?
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've had, for forever. You know, I mean, growing up, the police would camp outside my house, basically. Not because I were always doing things that I shouldn't be doing. It was just that my name just got thrown out everywhere. You know, it was me. It was just ridiculous, you know. But that's just the way it were. That were. So it was a good training ground for me, to be quite honest. But yeah, me and authority have never got on, unless it were my authority. And I'm just being honest there. Back then, that's exactly the kind of character I was. But I was always learning. You know, I was always learning. It was just a big learning trip for me. And I have to be honest, with the school that I attended, it was previously the grammar school, and a lot of the staff that were there were grammar school. And I have to say, I believe, came out the best of a lot of the schools in that time because they still hung on to what they knew. And some of them wanted to communicate it to you.
Yes.
So I have to say, I think I was lucky in that sense, you know. And I'm finding today a lot of people that came through that school are already focusing onto this kind of stuff. They come in and they want to talk to me. So there must have been a spirit of England, I would say, still running in that school before it became an academy. And it's starting to show itself in those that came through it when we had the older staff. And I can see that's quite interesting. So, but I really do understand what you're saying in relation to how so many of the teachers either couldn't answer the question and it wasn't part of the program for them to answer it for you, and would then belittle whomever. Yeah, that happened a lot. In fact, that was the format. Yeah. So yeah, continue.
So once you've set that up in a child's mind, you know, let's just say you're the exception to the rule. You know, most are compliant. The majority are compliant.
Exactly.
They've already learned from the parents before they even go to school that, you know, compliance is the way, because Well, back in the day, you got a smack or whatever, some kind of punishment. Well, when someone that moves away from consequences comes to me as a client, and it's everybody, every client I've ever worked with in my life has been over here, every single one. You can't do anxiety over here. It's just not possible. Only over here. So the mechanics of how it works is they move away from things that they don't want. So at the start of the session, I might say, okay, so let's just test out what it is you want. What do you want from these sessions? You know, where do you want to be 6 weeks from now? And I guarantee they'll say, well, I don't want to be anxious anymore. Yeah, I don't want to be anxious anymore. I want to avoid anxiety. Well, I don't want to be ill. I want to avoid illness. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to have a bad relationship. I don't want to be on benefits. I don't want. And they're constantly saying what they don't want. Okay. So again, this is the mindset, the filter of moving away from consequences. But if I were to, you know, obviously we can't do this over the screen, but this is an exercise I do with a lot of my clients. I'm quite fortunate. I've got a big consulting room that's 24 foot long, lots of furniture in it, rugs and this kind of thing. So what I'll do is I'll get the person to stand up at one end of the room and I'll say, okay, we're going to do an exercise. You need to walk forwards to acknowledge the passage of time, let's say. You're not allowed to stop because time doesn't stop. Now, I'm going to shout out for you to avoid certain things in the room. So you must keep moving, but you can turn and change direction as you choose. And they say, yeah, okay, no problem. Right, off you go. So they start walking. I say, don't tread on that rug. So they steer away from the rug and I say, don't go near that door. And they steer away from the door and I say, don't go near that chair. And you know what? Within 15, 20 seconds, they're getting flustered because they're running out of places to go. Now, there's only two ways that this exercise happens, and they're both bad. One is they do orbits of the rug in the center of the room. So they go round and round in circles in a place they don't want to be, or they end up stuck in a corner. So now they're between a rock and a hard place, in a place they don't want to be. That's it. That's the only two ways avoidance ends.
Now that makes sense.
Yeah, so they come and sit down and I say, okay, let's take a look at this. How hard was that as an exercise? And they say it was bloody awful, frankly. Okay. And what was your motivation? What was the emotion that you had that let you know to change direction and move away from these things? And they'll say, well, fear and anxiety. And I'll say, yeah, great, isn't it? So when you operate your life through avoidance and fear of consequences, all of your actions are motivated through fear and anxiety, which is it's the worst motivator you could possibly have. Yeah. Now, after that, here's the solution. And I say, come back here where you started. Okay, all the avoidance stuff's over, it's done. You don't need to avoid anything anymore. Now, when I say go, what I want you to do is I want you to walk from here down to the other end of the room. And when you reach that sofa down there, turn around and sit down. So off they potted, and they turn around and sit down. I say, great, end of exercise, come back here, let's talk about it. And I say, which was easier, your first exercise or the second one? Oh, the second one was much easier. Yeah, that's right. So what was it that got you from here to the sofa? Was it fear and anxiety? No, motivation. All right, so it didn't feel bad then? No, great. So what was present in the second exercise that was missing from the first? Nobody gets it, nobody. And I say, how about direction? How about an outcome? And they go, oh yeah, oh my God, that's why it was easy, wasn't it? I knew what I was doing. Well, that's right. You see, when you're moving away from consequences, all you're doing is moving away from something you don't want, but you're never moving towards anything you do want. So you're basically drifting. Now, we've been set up through the education system, and I don't care what Blair says. We've been set up, even us old ducks.
No, I'm not in disagreement with you. I know full well that's the case.
Yeah. So we've been set up to move away from consequences, which is allowing the government to use fear and consequence. If you don't do this, you're going to kill your gran. If you don't do this, we'll fine you £10,000. People go,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm anxious, I'll comply.
Prove it.
They don't know what they're doing. They don't question because they've
Let
been
me put
told
that in another context.
Go on, my friend.
Because what you're clearly describing there, through the education system, what they've actually done is program generations of gamma personality.
Yes.
The secret kings, the ones who think they're the hero in their mind, they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the thing about them is, if they had the capacity to motivate those thought patterns and try and create them as manifest, it would no longer be a gamma. So the gammas are the people that don't lose the thought processes, don't lose the urges, but they've completely lost the ability to move forward and put it into practice. And I come across these people all the time on all platforms who are trying to tell you what crack is, but have no substance. There's nothing to them whatsoever. And so within maybe a couple of sentence exchanges, they're throwing insults. If they haven't thrown an insult from the get-go. And that is precisely. It's gamma personality traits that they have shoved upon the baby boomers and also Generation X. And it's what they've done to the millennials. It's like a brain enema, I would say. It's just all emotion, no consequences. They've got buttons to press, numbers to ring. Nothing's their fault. There's always somebody else to blame. For instance, I've noticed that fat people, for some reason, have been coerced into believing that when they look in the mirror, they're not fat. So that's fine. I have no problem with that. Now, when that person is trying to insist that I don't see them as fat, they've got a problem. The reason being, not because I want to mock them, but because when I see a fat person, before I've spoken to them, I've already conjured up 20 ideas of who this person is. It's so important that that spoken word you get. You know, it's not the spoken word with the gob, that's the babble. The actual meaning to the term spoken word, which is in the Bible, is the frequency at a certain frequency, that energy that comes with, that's the spoken. So when you've all got your masks on, we're all missing, the normal people are missing the spoken word of what it is you're feeling, what's about to come out your mouth, your emotional state, etc. That's gone. So in creating this golem kind of creature, which is just walking around everywhere at the moment, they're further devolving our capacity into the no consequence field, as you so very well presented. Continue.
Okay, so let's just go back to some basics of how we operate. This is a pivotal thing for anyone with anxiety. This is your golden ticket out. Okay, in fact, it's your golden ticket out of anything. You just got to do it. You just got to stop talking crap to yourself, listening to lies on the outside. Use what God's given you, your brain, and crack on and just do it. I mean, the consequences are nonsense. They're made up. What are you living in fear of, really? So there's a what's called a presupposition. Well, there's several presuppositions in NLP, but my favorite, it's a little phrase, and the phrase goes like this: the map is not the territory. The map is not the territory. Okay, so what this means in effect, I'll give you the very condensed version. Your map, Sean's map, what goes on in Sean's head? Essentially thought processes. So your thoughts are broken down into these subsets. So we have what's called mental imagery, such as your imagination. And you can imagine something still in your mind's eye, like a photograph, or you can imagine something that's moving on TV. Okay, so you can do both of those things. So if I were to ask you, what colour is your next door neighbour's front door? Could you answer that?
Yeah, it's white.
It's white. Can you see it from where you're sitting right there? Physically see it?
No, I can't.
No, but you know that's what it is, right? So in order to answer the question, when you hear the question, your brain does a search, and an image of your next door neighbour's house pops up. You go, oh, that's the colour of the door. So this is what's called process. This is how the brain operates. So that's one example, mental imagery. The other way the brain works through thoughts is what we call internal dialogue. This is the chattery voice that doesn't shut up. Yeah? So in our anxious people, all it does is talk about stuff they don't want to happen. Oh my God, what if, what if, what if, what if? Oh, what if I get COVID? Oh, what if I get a fine? Oh, what if this? What if grandma gets sick and it's my fault? Okay, so that's an example of...
There is a remedy for
that. Not on air.
No, I studied Buddhism many years ago. As a teacher, I didn't ever consider myself a Buddhist or a religion. And the best I can say is it gave its promise. So I obviously achieved its aims, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that was the end of my Buddhist lessons.
Well, I teach...
and the chatter disappeared. The chatter went. I stopped living in my mind then.
Yeah.
And that's early 90s. So there are methods of removing that by, I would say, putting the right data in the processor so it can bring it forward and cancel it out.
Well, what I teach my clients, I teach them numerous ways to do this. You see, they assume that the anxiety is caused by stuff out here. As soon as they realize that they're self-inflicting it in here, which they are, every single person, they inflict it in here. As soon as they realize that it's in here, and I say, well, what if you could just switch that off like a light switch? And I mean, like that, 2 seconds. You know, no long rituals, no meditations, just that's NLP. That's the toolbox of NLP. So
that would help a lot of people out today.
It does. The recovery is massive. It's like 90, 96, 97%, and the 3% that don't recover are the ones that can't be bothered. Yeah. They just don't use it. And it's like, oh, okay, whatever. I can't force that, but if you want it and you use it, it'll fix whatever your problem is. So so that's the thought processes in here. The remainder of your map is your emotions in here, so your feelings. So map is thoughts in here and emotions in here. Now, I would suggest, Sean, that your thoughts and your emotions are all somewhere within your body under your skin. None of them are out here in the ether, let's say. So would you agree with
that? I think...
Without being too spiritual.
I'm keep everything under strict control. Is the way I operate, because the amount of nonsense I have to read and watch, if I allow myself to attach to it either emotionally or too much by the mind, it can cause problems. There are documents I have studied that have such a spiritual effect that one in particular, it took me about 4 days just to come back to some kind of normality. It was so horrific what I was reading. The fact that it was an official document and it was relating to schools in Lancashire and the preparation for mass deaths in schools, and this is going back in 2009, that affected me on a level that even I can't understand today. For about 4 days, it shifted my entire everything. It was terrible. It was horrendous. So we can all be moved and shifted by what we put input one various. But I think the best I'm tend to the control of my emotions.
Okay. Now,
and I use my mind only as a process. Something has to feel correct here.
Okay.
That's where I get my source resonance.
Now, I want you to separate. I want you to separate spiritual stuff from map. Map isn't spiritual stuff. Map's superficial.
Which is what I'm saying. So I think
is thought and emotion.
Fix still into that process and not mastering it. And you don't have to agree with what I'm saying. I'm just going off how so if I'm trying to evaluate how I'm operating, it's that I am who I am, and the mind, the emotions, the third eye, all these things are just tools that feed me information, that process information. If I'm me, who I am as a spirit is seeking something.
Okay.
So I sort of look at my makeup in those terms. It doesn't mean to say that I have completely freed myself from all the matrix, if you will, or in the Buddhism, you know, the lost a full loss of attachment to this place. That's not the case. There are still things that cause reactions that even I've forgotten is still there. And, you know, sometimes you work on them, sometimes you don't. But yeah, in general terms, that's how I function.
Okay. So let's take the spirituality out, because that's not NLP stuff.
No.
Like I say, NLP is thoughts and emotions and the resulting behaviors. That's the NLP parameter. Yeah. If you start bringing spiritual stuff in, you're all over the place, it falls apart.
Well, what I'm trying to point out there to people that would be interested is that what we're discussing is the ability for these people to operate and infect if your spirit is still fixed in your genetic system, which is inclusive of the mind, the emotional self, etc. You haven't pulled the sword from the stone. You're not the rider of the chariot. So that's the only reason I've brought that in, just so that I'm trying to show people that this guy, Adam, is showing you, is giving you an insight into the mechanics of how they use this stuff. If you can see this, you will change things for yourself if you give it focus, because you'll start to unravel the wizardry that's used in everything today. That's what's important about what Adam's bringing to the table today. But if you're really serious about this world, this life, the ultimate goal is to free yourself from that programming as your master.
Yeah. Well, the ultimate
thing, you Adam, I'm going to say no more on the.
Right, the ultimate freedom is to get out of map. Okay.
Exactly. Precisely. That's exactly what
you can shut map down. That's ultimate freedom, because that's where you find spirituality. You can't find spirituality within map, because map is superficial stuff, and it is map that they use to get you to behave how they want you to behave.
Precisely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to my question. Keep it simple. Your map are your thoughts and your emotions. Are they all within your skin, underneath, inside your body somewhere? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Where are they?
Floating around everywhere.
Bollocks. Don't give me don't give me spiritual.
Well, I'm not. It's just because if I'm in somebody's company, I can sense their thoughts. I can sense their mood.
If I said I was thinking of a 3-digit number now, would you be able to name it?
Say that again.
If I said I'm thinking of a 3-digit number right now, would you be able to tell me what it is?
No.
Okay, this is my point. Okay, your processes are internal, always. Don't confuse this. You're kidding yourself.
No, you're right. You are correct. However, and this is another, well, we've moved back into other a bit there. You see, another part of this system with the additives in the food, with the programming in the TV, the subliminal stuff, and the drugs in general.
Yes.
What they're doing is breaking down your auric barriers.
Yes.
Okay. So for people like that, they're spilling their thoughts, their emotions, their feelings everywhere. Everywhere. I don't know what's happened to the...
I think you've turned into a mountain, mate. So now,
what's going on there? That's a bit weird. Hey, look at that. Anyway, so I'm taking you off path, Adam. I do apologise. Please continue. I won't...
Okay, for everyone else that's watching and listening, Sean's been bloody difficult here. The correct answer is your thoughts and your emotions are all internal within your body. Okay, they're on the inside. Now, I don't know what Sean's thinking. Yeah, I'm a normal human. I don't have superhuman powers. I can't see the pictures in Sean's head. I can't hear the dialogue that's going in his head. I don't directly feel Sean's emotions. Okay, that's how it is. And the reason for this is that Sean's thoughts and emotions are personal to him. They only exist in his body and in his mind. Okay, likewise, my thoughts, my pictures, my dialogue, my emotions, they're all in my body. Sean does not feel those, not directly. He might have empathy, he might think he knows stuff. But as I said to him, if I say I'm thinking of a 3-digit number and he can't pick it out, that's because he can't hear the voice in my head or see my pictures. That's the point I'm making. This is the NLP structure. Okay, it's dead simple, but you have to look at it within these parameters. If you start bringing in spiritual stuff, that's not what NLP is. Okay, spiritual stuff's up here.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
Yeah.
And what's doing great so far. Please continue.
So,
and I don't know what's happened to my picture.
That's all right, man. You look better that way.
Oh, that's probably right. Go on, carry on.
So that's the map. The map is the thoughts and the emotions. It's all internal. It's personal. There are so many potential variables in any given map. The odds of you having an identical map to anyone else on planet Earth is basically zero. You know, genetics, your genetic profile is common compared to the combination of maps. You know, what makes you an individual isn't your cellular signature, it's your map. Even if you got a twin brother, your cells might be very much like his. Your map, chalk and cheese.
Formed as a child.
Yeah, the territory is what's going on out here. The territory is reality.
Yeah. Now,
the curious thing is that in map, we're all individuals. There's no two same maps on planet Earth. But the territory, give or take, is the same for everyone. So if I was sitting in the same room as Sean, rather than doing this over webcam, I would be sitting in the same 4 walls. The temperature would be the same. You know, we're breathing the same air, etc. Our feet are on the same floor. Our realities are identical, but our maps are different. Because I might think, in my head, my little chirpy voice might fire up and say, "Oh, bloody hell, Sean, it's not very warm in here, mate. We should turn the central heating up a bit." At the same time, Sean could be thinking in his chattery voice, "Oh, it's really hot and stuffy in here. I might open a window, let a bit of fresh air and cool it down." But if we bring a thermometer out and we put it down on the table right between us, the temperature's identical for both of us. Yeah?
Yeah.
So what we've got here is 2 completely opposing maps, perceptions, but our reality is identical. And here's where we fall down as human beings. And this is the mask thing. This is the COVID thing. This is the divide and conquer thing to the nth degree. Okay? It's magic. It's so simple and it's magical. Out of the box, the way we're hardwired to work is not, the map is not the territory. That's the truth. The map is not the territory. The way we're wired to look at things is my map is the territory. The way I see it is the way it is. You put 10 people in exactly the same situation, there's a good chance you'll get 10 different responses.
Yeah.
So the question is, how could the situation be causing the responses? How could the reality cause the responses if the reality is the same for everyone, you get 10 different responses? It's garbage. It can't work that way. And this is why, you know, I don't know, just for argument's sake or an example's sake, let's say Sean's in the supermarket and someone comes in and says, "Where's your mask?" And Sean has a bit of to and fro with this person. And this person ends up screaming and shouting, and Sean gets really uptight as well. The situation is the same. The COVID situation is the same for everybody. The reality is what it is. But the person in the mask believes that their perception is the truth. Sean believes his perception is the truth. They're not arguing about the bloody reality. They're arguing about their maps and the perceptions. And the government has become very adept at manipulating people's perceptions for their own gains. Not yours, for their own gains. Okay? For the banks, for the pharmaceutical industries, you know, for all the stuff that we don't want to do well. They are manipulating you, and you are helping them do it by not thinking. You are just going with what they say. Oh, well, I know it was on the BBC. I know that, and because I think that's the truth, it must be the truth. You see, from that, we got to ask the right questions.
And people today are now saying that they don't feel dressed without it.
I know. Yeah. Well, you see, they're in danger. They, you know, they need a consequence to move away from the, you know, the lethal respiratory pathogen that the World Health Organization told us about on their September 2019 annual report. You know, their worldwide exercise that we're going to do with the UN. You know, that one that they need to be scared of. So they need to wear a paper mask to keep a virus out that would just get around the edges. You know. It's nonsense. People aren't thinking about it.
No, they're not. The map, like you said, is creating the territory. Yeah. They
think they see reality, but all they see is what they've been told to see. But because they don't question it, this is their new truth. And it's not about getting people. I do this because I want people to see the truth. I want people to grow up and see their kids live better than we did. But I'll tell you, on our current course, that's not going to happen. Your kids are going to grow up in a concentration camp at this rate.
Oh, it might not even be our kids that are growing up in concentration camps.
Yeah.
They're that far going. But as I say many times to people, it's an exercise, and it's only keeping going because everybody's obeying.
It's the compliance, It's what we were taught to do at school.
It's 5%, so we need 5% push will stand down because there are fewer than them than there are of us. Adam, I don't want to take this now into a bug interview. What I'm going to say is you have given us plenty at this point to mull on.
Sure.
Would you be happy to come back and do a second part to this?
Absolutely, mate.
Because
if anyone's got any questions, ask. Send a question to Sean.
That's another good idea. If anybody has questions, we can do that. We can answer the questions specifically. But it is important, I think, first that people start to recognize there is something being used against them, to identify what it is, and then to recognize it when it's being used. Because if you can do that, you can break the spell all by yourself. And that is a very important thing that's required right now, I do believe. Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I think it went in a couple of directions that probably you weren't expecting.
Always the best way.
I'm sure it'll come across quite well. There's quite a bit of sense in that short interview. So I'll say to you, Adam, thank you very much, and I look forward to you joining me again.
It's been a pleasure, Sean.
Thank you very much. You take care.